My name is Susan Colbert. I am interviewing Thomas Garrett on May 10th, 2021 at the Sparta Public Library in Sparta, Illinois. Mr. Garrett, where and when were you born?
I was born in East St. Louis, Illinois, at the Furman Deloge Hospital. Oh gosh, that was on a Wednesday morning, from what my mother told me, 1968.
Who were your parents and what are their names?
My mother and father. My father's name was Thomas Garrett Sr., and my mother is Laverne Garrett, and she's still alive and right here in town. My father passed away in 2012. They were both Army veterans, so they met while in service, and from there, I came from it.
What were their occupations? Did they have other occupations besides the
Yes.
service?
My mother worked for many years at Chester Mental Health and with the state itself, as well as with the schools, District 140. And my father worked out of Illinois Power. He was out of the Baldwin Power Plant. We're born and bred right here in Randolph County.
Do you have siblings?
Oh, yes. 10 of us. 10 of us every 2 years apart, and that ranged from Richard to Dave to Diana to Brett, and then myself, mid-range or midway. Then of course came Paula, Rebecca, Ruth, Lydia, and then my youngest brother Nathan, or Nathaniel.
Did any of them serve in the military?
Most of us did. Richard and Dave were both Navy. Brett went off to college. Ruth she joined I think she was an ROTC out of SIU Carbondale. My sister Rebecca, she's not per se in the military, but her husband is a naval officer, and she's of course a military spouse. So you might as well say she's military too. Matter of fact, she's more military than most of us if you think about it. Lydia and Nathaniel, of course, he's now in the Air Force, and he's due to retire, I think, in another couple of years or so. So it's of all of us, at least 5 of us have been very perfunctory and active about it.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up right here in Randolph County, Sparta, Illinois. And believe it or not, throughout all of my military travels, I always claimed Sparta. It's because it was such a great place to grow up at, that when you get to Rome or to Egypt or Jerusalem, and they say, well, where are you from? And you tell them Sparta, Illinois. Well, now you got people not just narrowing it down to Illinois and Chicago or anything. You specify it, and from there you can spark a conversation, and that was usually what I did.
So you attended the Sparta schools.
Yes.
Did you like school?
I did. Believe it or not, I liked school to the point that I enjoyed it a little too much. I was a terrible student, but I was an avid learner. I don't know if that makes much sense, but it was just, I always stayed involved in things, and some got me into trouble, while others, it kept me busy.
What did you enjoy doing in your youth?
Believe it or not, playing outdoors. I think I can remember building things with my hands a lot. And when it came to playing in our field across the road from us, I had a Hot Wheels collection of cars. So I made intricate cities and things in this gentleman's cornfield. And I could wait. Every year he would disc it up real well, and it'd have those huge clumps of dirt, and I would make roads and highways through it. And I remember one particular year, I used those disc ground so well that he left that corner alone for me, and he saw the cars and he saw it looked like a city so well that got me into the engineering things later. But it impressed him.
What were you doing before you joined the service?
My first job, I worked out at Kroger. Norb Heath hired me on. I started there, and of course, I went from Kroger to McDonald's to Pizza Hut, and I worked right here locally, like most high school students here in Sparta. You know, you get 16, you get your driver's license, you get a job, and you hit the work world. Typical, I was one of those students who did the same thing. It wasn't until that I got an opportunity, the Marine Corps and the Army, and at first I kicked around the Army and Air Force. And the Marine Corps said, well, we can get you in before June. Mr. Bottom, my guidance counselor, Ms. Vallow, spoke with Mr. Bottom, the principal at the time, and you know, she asked me, would you be interested? And I said, yes, I would love to go into the Marines. And she pushed that area. She said, well, I think you'd do well with it. So she worked things through and got me into the Marine Corps in April of 1989.
How long did you serve?
I did the 4 years in the Marine Corps. I did the 16 years in the Army active duty. And after that, I went from the Army active side to the Illinois Army Reserve, or Army National Guard, then into Army Reserve, and did the whole 21 years. From 1989 to 2009.
How old were you when you joined?
Oh gosh, I was 18. I was young. I was new to the world. Yeah, 18.
And so you enlisted.
Yes, I did.
How did you come about choosing that branch of the military, the Marines?
The challenge. I think nobody talked with me about the Marine Corps. Everybody was, all my friends were talking about the Army and other things. And Sean Lacey and I were in science class, and he had, and I kind of kicked that around one day and held a conversation. And that was one where we both kind of intended on joining the Marines fresh out of high school. And of course, he had passed away, and I went on and stayed and kept my promise with him. At least I'm going to do it, We both were going to be poolies at the same time.
What happened when you departed for training?
That happened over a weekend, and I never told my parents. So I left that Friday. I went up to MEPS out of, I think it was Robert Fulton Federal Building out of St. Louis. I took the ASVAB that afternoon. We did the exams and all that evening, and finally went to Lambert. Flew out to San Diego that night, and I landed there early in the morning. Of course, every Marine tells you about the story about the yellow footprints. Well, I was on the yellow footprints about 11 o'clock that night.
Tell me about the yellow footprints.
Well, that is one of the most exciting part about the Marine Corps. The night was so dark that I remember us riding from San Diego Airport, and we were on a bus and pulls into MCRD San Diego, and the drill instructor opens up the door. The bus comes to a stop. The drill comes on, and he says, "On behalf of General Breath, welcome to MCRD San Diego. Now get off the bus," and he yells at us, and he just, those yellow footprints, everybody better be on it, and we all flew to that one set of footprints. Of course, I was short and in the very front seat, so he was gonna grab me, and I ducked him from underneath him and ran, and and I made his list. Because he and other drill instructors were kind of messing with me in the receiving barracks. Yeah, you missed me, but I'm gonna catch you next time, Garrett. And I remember everybody knew my name after that, Garrett. Being short, being skinny, and black, all those things were the factors that that just you stood out in the crowd. So once they shaved our heads, we didn't all look the same still. That little short, skinny dude over there, guess what? He's a target. The Marine Corps was wonderful about that, because once you have about 30 seconds to make that famous phone call, you know, you have your script on the wall and, hi, Mom and Dad, I made it to MCRD San Diego. I'm doing fine. The drill instructors are taking good care of me. I love you. Bye-bye. That's it. You know, I made that famous phone call, and my mother said, you know, she was wanting to say more. What? Where are you? What happened? You know, you can't say anything after that. Of course, the drills are like, all right, next. You know. And that was probably one of the biggest changes. It was a transition in my life. I think that was where I was on my time and terms. And my dad had just one thing to say: if 10,000 other guys can do it, so can you. And that was it. And he kind of that little thing kept me through the my transition in boot camp.
Tell me about your early days of training.
Oh gosh, my earlier days of training was probably one of the most experiences that I ever had. I remember years of guard. I mean, you're always on guard for everything, day in, day out. You're always marching, you're always learning drill and ceremony and training, in boot camp specifically. One of the things that I learned was I was a pretty good shot here in Sparta. You know, we grew up with a firearm to us in Sparta. Well, you go to school and you would have rifles in the back windows, so it was something that we were pretty familiar with. Once I got to boot camp, I was probably one of the better shots, so that made it easier. Of course, other areas, road marches, that same amount of gear that they gave everybody else. Well, for a person 6'5", yeah, that 100 pounds of gear, that ain't bad. For a person 5'2" and 103 pounds, they put me on double rations. And even with double rations and that 100 pounds of gear, I ended up losing weight. I still ended up, you know, just doing the same training with everybody else. It was probably one of the biggest and the greatest experiences that I could look back on, and I'm amazed with it. After that, some of the other training that I got after boot camp, I went to SIU, School of Infantry, out of Camp Pendleton. That was where you go into all of the infantry fundamentals. And that's where I received training as an 0341 mortarman. And that was an indirect fire infantryman. That was one of those training areas that you get extensive, enhanced understanding of everything about the Marine Corps. You're looking at what the fleet really consists of. You're going into that phase of it, really of what a Marine is and what caliber of Marine you're going to work on and be. I also attended Mare Island, MSG duty, Marine Security Guard duty or training up there in Northern California. From there, my timeline for it went from San Diego to SIU, Camp Pendleton, to Mare Island, Northern California, and then finally I gotten orders from Mare Island rather than going to Japan like I was hoping to get embassy duty. They gave us, matter of fact, orders came down from the Marine Corps for me and another guy named Matthew Fouch to leave Mare Island, and we ended up going to Weapons Company 37 out of 29 Palms, California. So I went from Northern California right on back down to Southern California.
Do you recall your instructors?
I remember all my drill instructors easily. And that was drill instructor Staff Sergeant Sokol, drill instructor Rivera, and drill instructor Staff Sergeant Bressler. Those three were the main drills that I had throughout boot camp. After that, SIU or School of Infantry. I don't remember exactly who those instructors were, names wise. Faces wise, I do, because I remember one called me Willie Moscone. Me and a guy got caught playing pool one weekend. So he got, me and a gentleman by the name of Gator, Robbie Gators, another recruit, got caught playing pool, which was supposed to be off limits. And I got the nickname of Willie Moscone, and he was Minnesota Fats. So we were famous, throughout the remainder of SIU or SOI.
What were your instructors like?
They were good. They were thorough. I do remember this about them. When it came to professionals, these guys knew everything. I mean, you could ask them questions and they would cover all the details of who, what, when, where, and what we were going to do.
What did you think of basic training?
I liked it because I'll remember being in my best physical shape. I was a pretty good runner here with Buzz's, Bradley's team here out of cross country, and Coach North out of high school and track. And once I got there, I was a decent runner, so that helped me with the Marine Corps. And once I got into the Marine Corps, it was easier for me to keep up with everybody when it came to road marches. Runs just ran. You didn't even, I forget even the distances. It was just, you were gone for a half hour running.
How did you adapt to that regimen, that physical regimen?
I didn't like getting yelled at in boot camp, so I woke up 10 minutes early to avoid it. Most of the time, by the time 5:30 reveille came around and the drill instructors were throwing the trash can down in the middle of the squad bay, I was already in the bathroom brushing my teeth, and had my bunk ready. So to me, it was just, I caught on quick in that regard. You don't have to yell at me, get the point across, and, let me know what we're going to be doing. I'll go from there.
Well, how was the food?
I was double rations, so I had to eat everything twice as much, and I never got a chance to taste it. But if that makes sense, we ate, but yeah, which ended up making me lose weight. I ate as much as I did, but I burned off those calories probably about a half hour later.
Did you get any free time during boot camp?
No. I mean, you can call it free time when you can, on Sundays, the way that I got away was I did get a chance to do chapel. Every opportunity I got made use of chapel, and I got a chance, we didn't have washing machines, you had the wash racks, where you had a spigot and you had a large slab of concrete that you wash your clothes on. So those were the laundry days that when you made free time, you made it that way. On occasion, if you're on fire watch or on guard duty, you can walk, and I had a good, decent little notebook that I kept. So when I was on guard duty, I would be taking notes and writing letters and things while I had that time.
You wrote to your family?
Yep, as much as I could, when I could.
What was the worst part of boot camp?
The crucible and the lack of sleep. I can remember, I think, constantly just training and constantly just the pain. My body, I can still remember even now how tight it was just constantly working, and you're constantly road marching. You had weight on you every day, every time,
And you received specialized training that you had talked about earlier.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about that?
Well, some of it again was with when it came to the infantry side of things, we had your regular infantry, you had your light infantry, you had your mortars. And for us, we kind of got cross-trained in everything. You got your heavy equipment training. We had also our communications. Communications, before the internet, even to today, we were just getting kind of grounded in that sense that you learned your radios, SINGARS training that I received, in the Marine Corps there. Army, they gave me thorough training in a lot of other areas. I got engineering training. I got satellite systems network training, which again, that's the fielding of the internet itself and how you're going to send a signal up. You're going to make that signal work through whatever entities you're working on, and then you're putting it into the internet itself, into individual units.
Did you tell me you entered the Marines in 1989 and you served until what year?
93.
93.
Marine Corps.
And in 93 you joined the Army?
Yep.
And you served until what year?
Till 2009 on active duty, and after 2009 I went from 2000 till 2000 active duty on itself, and from 2000 till 2005 I did the Illinois National Guard, and from there, throughout that time period, I worked at Lincoln's Challenge Academy, and also so many other areas, because I'm in Illinois now, so I had an opportunity to be a carpenter, worked at Walmart, worked at Lincoln's Challenge, and, made use of it here. After that, I joined the reserves and finally, finished my career, culminated in it in 2009, out of Granite City.
How did you travel between locations of service?
Well, most of the time with that, it was that you did early on MAC flights out of Scott Air Force Base. I did some of the travel, when I came home on leave, I would take some of the MAC flights out of St. Louis. It started in Scott Air Force Base, that the MAC command was pretty active. And it went from Scott Air Force Base that the MAC you could take out of Lambert all the way at Terminal Number 1. So you flew from Lambert out to LAX, and from LAX I could go out to 29 Palms. And that was, believe it or not, that I don't know what happened with that program, but I think the MAC flights were still pretty active then.
Did you serve abroad?
Yes, I did do training in Panama. I did training in Japan, Israel, the multinational force observers mission out of Sinai, Egypt. There's many different areas though.
What's some of your memories of serving abroad?
Being able to fit in with people. I think being able to represent America, the country itself, and to be, again, one of those small town people who, when you're in the Philippines, no one's ever heard of Sparta until you bring it to them. You're in Japan or Egypt, they've never heard of Sparta until you tell them about it, and then you kind of can get them grounded to get their interest.
What was the most impressive place that you saw?
The most impressive, I'd have to say probably mainland Japan. I fit in well with Japan because it was a clean area that really stayed with me. That they maintained the city itself, as cluttered as it was clean. The highways didn't have any, I was looking for debris on the side of the highways, as busy as it was, and I just wasn't seeing it. We got a chance to go to the Golden Temple and different, I did the tourist bit in Japan in and of itself. I think that really stayed with me. Another one, of course, was Egypt. I got a chance to climb on the pyramids, and they had a sign that said, "Don't climb on the pyramids." Well, naturally, I'm a Marine. I mean, guess what? I'm gonna do that. And I got a photo taken of the pyramids, and of course, Jerusalem was another one. I loved finally getting my faith grounded once I got a chance to go into Egypt and Jerusalem. I think both of those places just stayed with me. It's one thing to read the Bible. It's another thing to travel from Egypt into Israel and to see it for yourself, and to actually to go to the Golan Heights and to go to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and to walk the Holy Land.
What kind of friendships did you form while you were serving, and with whom?
Oh man, I think most of the Marines, there's that band of brothers that even to today, I can remember meeting the guys initially, and I can still see these guys now that we're in our 50s and 60s. You see these faces, and you still kind of remember them from when we were all 20 and teenagers.
What did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
Believe it or not, I did. I traveled. I went from 29 Palms to Palm Springs. I spent most of my time with a guy named Matthew Fouch. We had left Mare Island and joined, and was in the same unit in the Marine Corps, going from Mare Island to 29 Palms. So he and I would always make it a point to go to Palm Springs, and we would go to the DoubleTree. I learned to play golf. He kind of showed me how to do that. And that was where, when you're in Palm Springs and you're not playing golf, you're wasting your time. I also learned a few other things. I learned how to do aircraft repair. That kind of got me interested in some of the things like that at that time too. So I learned how the dynamics of a small helicopter were, and Matt was one of those guys who kind of, he showed me some of those things.
Did you ever attend a USO show?
Yes. Matter of fact, 38 Special out in 1992, the band 38 Special was out there, and I worked as part of the crew on that USO show in and of itself after Desert Storm was over, and we'd come back from it. And along with that same one, I also got a chance to meet Barbara Bush the same year. She did her visit after Desert Storm, and I was like closer than you and I are right now. And she came up to me and she said, "Thank you for your service," and gave me a hug. And I remember her being about my height, and that was something that just stayed with me. Years later, I got an autographed picture of her and President Bush, and I still have it today.
Did you have contact with civilians, and how did they treat you?
Oh man, they were pretty well. They were exceptionally well. That in the Philippines, when I got there, I got along with so many different people that I played with them. There was a papaya tree. I remember early on getting there, and this guy was showing me how to climb it, so I ended up climbing it and cutting down the papaya, and they gave me that nickname, Papaya, after that. So wherever they saw me throughout the base, hey, Papaya, and I fit in pretty well with a lot of the locals there in the Philippines, as well as in Panama.
Did you ever meet any POWs?
I did. During Desert Storm, we captured some members, and I remember one particular night that we had a guy by the name, I forget his name specifically, but he spoke exceptional English, and he said he was from LA. Now he was our POW, so we're still gonna keep you captive. It's just okay, we'll get an interpreter. We'll let you know, the professionals take care of you, but you're still our captain, you know.
What were your commanding officers like?
Captain Zachary, my commander today, he's still a good friend on Facebook. These guys were, when it came to professionalists, they were among the best. As much as you didn't want to disappoint them, I guess you might say, that was one of those things that kind of drove me. That I was a stickler about it, but they were disciplinarians as well.
What was the highest rank you achieved?
I was a one officer candidate. That was the highest rank in and of itself. I was a staff sergeant in the Army, and I was in Captain Cruz. I was their satellite systems network supervisor. And Captain Cruz referred me to the warrant officer course because I took care of the radio as well, and he knew he wanted, I wanted to do more with it. So in order to work on SINGARs, you have to have a skill level or a particular job that authorizes you. And warrant officer was what they had put me in for. Senator Luchteveld and Dan Wrights, Congressman Wrights put me in for being a warrant officer. And those were the referrals that took me into that warrant officer course.
Did you see combat?
Yes, that was Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the whole time.
How did you feel when witnessing casualties and destruction?
To today, that still stays with me. It's still clear, and it's a vivid memory that it doesn't go anywhere. I still can recall when and where, and some smells still kind of remind you of it. Some sounds even. It was an experience I'll never forget.
How did your experiences in war affect your life?
I became emotionally detached from a lot of things. Now I got spiritually grounded because I had a pocket Bible that I stayed. I avidly read it every time I had a few minutes of downtime. But when it came to building ties and bonds with people, that became difficult. To today, that I have a dog that's more my emotional support animal now. That he kind of keeps me grounded more than anything.
How long have you had your dog?
About a year now. Well, it goes on a year in June.
And what is your dog's name?
Ace. That's my Ace.
Were you ever wounded?
Yes, I had, but even to today, I still have a broken ankle. I walk with that injury still. It didn't, although you can't prove that it wasn't during combat itself. It was just years of road marching, years of working, and of course the 100-pound road, rucksacks that you're walking with.
How long did you serve on the front lines?
The whole time. Things started up in December. We landed. January, we transitioned from Desert Shield into Desert Storm. Desert Storm, that whole time I was in theater. I was part of we called the Spearhead element. And that was Task Force Grizzly, and our sister element was Task Force Ripper.
What were the living conditions on the front lines?
Man, you live off your sleeping robe or sleeping pad and a sleeping bag. And if you had time, you would unroll and actually sleep. Otherwise, you sat down, you stayed in uniform or even mop gear, you slept in place, you got up, you kept moving. So when it was comfort, well, you're going to have to wait till you can get to a place where you can actually have that kind of comfort.
Did you ever lose friends?
Yes. The morning that we had a friendly fire, fratricide that morning, Task Force Ripper was at our 6 o'clock and they shot at us. And that was one of the initial shots I can remember feeling go past and the concussion behind it. And I think that was a shot that killed a friend named Christian Porter. He was one of the, where as a mortar, you're at the behind everybody. That as your line units are ahead of you moving, these are in vehicles, these are people who are also walking too. But you're trying to cover them from an in-defilade position. So with mortars, you're firing over everyone and doing an indirect fire. That's how we were, because I was their communications RTO, radio transmitter. I maintained that, so so that if something happens, I was immediately the one who would call things in first. I see certain things happening here, there. You call it in. You let higher command know what's going on. And that particular morning, during Desert Storm, we had received incoming friendly fire from Task Force Ripper immediately behind us. That was the ones who really did more damage to our unit than anybody else, morale-wise as well as killing Lance Corporal Porter.
What were your duties? And I think you've already said what your duties were. Did you
Right.
have other duties besides the communications?
I also did you're doing everything that comes up. So even though you may have a job description in and of itself being this, if everything else needed to be done, you kind of covered it and seeing what else needed to be done. Everything from your digging, fighting positions for yourself, and then when you finish yours, well, you're moving on to somebody else's. We dug an area that today now it was at the time we were Task Force Grizzly. So we dug and set up an area that they called Fob Grizzly, which now is still over there, and I think it's a base in and of itself.
Did you ever have to do a job you weren't trained for?
You figure it out. I think that was, you don't get per se trained. You just, you better, if you find a manual, read up on it, and then you do it. So there were many jobs that I wasn't trained for specifically, but you still, I always loved learning anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of those things that I always picked up on, even from school, my formative school years. That if it got my interest, I was learning. Engineering happened to be one of them.
Did you use your engineering knowledge and talents when you were in the service?
Yes. I as a communications engineer, that was one of the first things, and that was where, when I reported to the unit, they had the old switchboard where you could, connect different company units and elements, and they talked with each other. My unit, once I got there, they still use those and the Singars, and it was an old antenna called an OE254, 60-foot antenna that you had to, because I was the only person, I had to assemble it myself, get it up and running so that the rest of the unit could hear with using that one antenna. Well, you're just one person. So if I needed to have it set up in 2 different locations, it was me doing it or training somebody else to work with me. And what I do was I would train trainers, so that in a sense, duplicating myself within the different squad elements.
What part of your job did you least enjoy?
say I least enjoyed leaving it. You know, when I was I'm one of those people. When I'm at work, I'm at work, and I think that fulfillment of constantly having something to do. You know, you just do.
What was your most memorable experience while serving?
Oh gosh, the travels. I think some of the Philippines being right off the bat, the very first place that I got a chance to leave the United States, to land into a whole different new country and traveling. That was probably one of the most memorable things that I did.
What was your most frightening experience?
The significant emotional event of Desert Storm. I think that was probably the one that stayed with me. Wasn't much else that really, scares you, so to speak. I think also my first rappel, I did an air assault training, and that was also probably, it wasn't so much frightening as much as it was that you feel that sense of, rigging yourself up and being able to do an actual rappel from a higher tower. You trust your knots, and I don't know if this is gonna work well or not, and I've lost some weight and it's feeling kind of slim, but you still, once you do it, you find out whether or not it works, and it is.
What was your most exhausting experience? And I think you've already told us about lack of sleep.
Yep. Oh yes, and the miles of road marches. During 29 Palms, they have over 900 miles of training ground, and of that, you're walking all of it. I don't think of too many spots in that area that I didn't walk literally, to it.
Where were you when your period of service was up?
I finally got a chance at Granite City to go from starting out in the Marines in San Diego, California, and then to finalize my whole military career, going so many different places, and to finish up in Granite City, Illinois was probably fitting. It was a brand new unit and a brand new facility, and I remember I was a food sanitation inspector, so I had to condemn their dining facility. And it was because the water was non-potable. So if you can't have potable water, you can't wash dishes with non-potable water. You can't cook anything without water, and your soldiers have to get, they gotta drink water. I mean, for hydration purposes, for health and safety, and so many different things. So that was probably the hardest decision I had to make was, condemning that particular facility. And the company commander, I commend Lieutenant Brewer at the time and Captain Cruz. They said, they gave me authorization. They said, well, if you feel like it's got to do it, sign your name to it and we'll back you. But, we're not going to say we gave you authorization to do it. We just know you're going to do it anyway, Sergeant Garrett, if it's the right thing. And it was the right thing. I condemned the dining facility. Our commanding general was upset initially and was like, what? You condemned it? Why? And you give them the right, you give them the information that you got. The city doesn't have good water. We really don't want to do it, sir. And he said, all right. And after that, the CG signed off and they got authorized a whole brand new structure that's there now. I mean, it's a brand new unit. And I remember my last night in the Army, I slept in the arms room. And from there, I closed out my career.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
I'm still readjusting to civilian life. My girlfriend even said, "You're not a very good civilian," and not in a bad way. It's just you're constantly thinking militarily what needs to be done. I can walk up and down the streets here in Sparta, and I see so much road repairs that needs to be done, and the temptation is there. If I was part of the city, I could do this. You know, and help to assign some of the guys, and we can actually lay out a map of the city and areas that we can fix up. And yeah, I'm a civilian. Can't do it. It doesn't work like that.
Have you remained in contact with, or are you reunited with fellow veterans?
Yeah, I still touch bases with each of the guys. You know, we have weekly meetings on Facebook, and of course, you lose Facebook friends. Some of the guys pass away. We have, of course, the PTS 22s that commit suicides, and of course, we had one that did last November, Alex Falcon, who's close to us. So you kind of touch bases with everybody and keep morale going, you know, that we haven't forgotten each other, you know.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
Not anymore. I used to, and I stayed proactive with them, and I would say I take that back in the sense that not as active as I would like to be. You know, I was a part of the VFW and part of the in both here in Sparta as well as in Bloomington Normal as part of member of the VFW.
What key knowledge, skills, abilities, and experiences that you learned from military service would you say are the most valuable?
The 14 leadership traits:
And what are your 14 leadership traits?
justice, judgment, decisiveness, dependability, integrity, tact. You know, all of these stayed with me even now because it's kind of a lifestyle and a rule of making decisions based on all of these, you know, traits that make a whole person a whole person.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view this interview?
I would say this: the unwritten rule was don't volunteer for everything, but I would have to counter that and say no, volunteer for everything. Get that experience under your belt, because working in a work detail when you're a private, when you become a staff NCO, well, now you can be in charge of that detail and you can teach others based off of that experience, and to use it, learn everything that you can. Get the experience, try it all out, and use it.
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
There's so much. I think look back at your community and to use your military experience to bring back home, you know. And I think taking care of people and to provide that same security that you have in the military outside of it as well.
This concludes our interview. Thank you for taking part in the interview, and thank you for your service.
It's been a privilege. Thank you.
You did very well.